The first book that I have here is African Markets and the Ubuntu Business Model, a perspective on economic informality in Nairobi. And the writer is Dr. Njeri Kinyanjui. The next one is Vyama Institutions of Hope, first edition, Ordinary People's Market Coordination and Society Organization by Dr. Njeri Kinyanjui. The third one is The Pace of Progress, a journey throughout mental health, resilience, and adaptation by Dr. Njeri Kinyanjui. Next is Neoliberal Pipe Dreams, Ubuntu in the Reconstruction of Africa by Dr. Njeri Kinyanjui. Coffee Time, Dr. Njeri Kinyanjui. Discuss on My Foot, a testimony of lived scholarship on structural exclusion and urgency of Kenya's invisible, Dr. Njeri Kinyanjui. Wanjiku in Global Development, Everyday Ordinary Women, Livelihood Economy in Kenya by Dr. Njeri Kinyanjui.
I'm going to reflect on what I have been asked to do, and that is to share with you how African women theologians are addressing some of the things that my sister Njeri has been writing on. I'm quite grateful for this opportunity to join you all in celebrating a great woman and her great scholarship, and indeed her generous spirit of mentorship and friendship. Njeri and I, by virtue of our birth names, have mother-daughter-mother relationship since our only one-time meeting in Geneva in 2007. During our brief encounter, she struck a chord with my husband Njoroge, as he said, as they were both born in Gatodo and had much to share about their childhood, to the point that when last week I told Njoroge I was listening to Njeri's presentation on the scars on my food, he recalled how she narrated about her experiences in picking coffee and tea way back in the village. We never met again, so it is a pleasant surprise that I got this invitation to be a speaker this morning. Thanks to her many publications and social media, and especially her use of YouTube, which she makes very good use of, I have followed her research findings and ongoing discourse on women's agency, power, and contributions in the workforce, economy, ethics of care, as she calls it, Ubuntu feminism, which is indeed grounded in indigenous African knowledge and her deep spirituality, which is nourished by her Catholic faith. Her recent contributions, also on mental health and well-being, is of particular interest and a long overdue academic discourse in this country. Njeri has truly lived out the biblical call to be fruitful and multiply. She has done it with humility, gratitude, and abundant life. I can only say glory to God for my sister, for indeed she embodies the spirit of Ubuntu, its philosophy and ethics, and what I also call, and I have written about, spirituality of resistance and transformation. My sister Njeri, keep on disrupting the status quo and the injustices of colonized economy, mindset, and lifestyles. My task this morning is to highlight the theological approach to feminism and ethics in Africa from women's experiences and perspectives. Hence, the title of my brief remarks is on Ubuntu Feminist Theology, Contextual Communal Approach from African Women Experiences and Perspectives. Everything has a backstory, so I reconnect with Njeri in 1989 when she was heading to Cambridge University. I was with about 70 African women whom I would refer to as emerging theologians and religious scholars from theological institutions and universities, when we gathered in Accra, Ghana, to lift our voices, our vision, our aspirations to ensure African theological thought and practice is no longer only in the hands of men and foreigners, especially those who had colonized us. For more than a decade, prior to the Accra gathering of the 70 women, Professor Mase Aba Oduyoye of Ghana, a theologian in her own right and a teaching professor at the University of Ibadan in Nigeria, worked tirelessly to create a data of these rare species of theologically educated African women and religious scholars. Way back in 1978, as a first-year seminarian at St. Paul's United Theological College, Limuru, which we now call St. Paul's University, I happened to meet Auntie Mercy, as we fondly refer to her, at a World Council of Churches Global Theological Consultation for Young Women Theologians, where we gathered as about 60 women, ordained and lay. In that gathering in 1978, we were only 8 African women, and Auntie Mercy, being the most seasoned, was presenting on the status of theological education for women in Africa. This is the time I was introduced to contextual communal theologizing, because rather than do her own presentation, her own individual thoughts, she invited the rest of us, the 7 of us, to join her to prepare the presentation and to ensure we agreed and owned whatever resolutions we drafted as African delegates. One of the major resolutions was to create an interfaith Pan-African theological platform of this emerging group of African theologically educated women and religious scholars. Hence, in 1989, Mase Aba Oduyoye helped us to create a theological platform for growing and amplifying our theological and ethical voices through research, writing and publishing, and mentorship in the name of the Circle of Concerned African Women Theologians. During that conference, in 1989 in Accra, Ghana. Mase Abaoduyoye gave the keynote speech, and with a loud voice to a large audience, because at that point she had invited many women from the churches, from the universities in Ghana, and also from the Muslim community. She said these words: "No bird flies with one wing. Therefore, African men theologians cannot alone make African theology fly. Men in theology must realize that it is only as women are empowered to provide the second wing that theology will fly." The majority of us in that gathering were Christian women, and for the 5 days we were together, we reflected on one of the most powerful scripture narratives of the healing of the nameless bleeding woman for 12 years. This woman, because of her illness, she had exhausted all her finances, and she was totally desperate. But at the same time, the same narrative brings the raising from the death of the daughter of a synagogue leader by the name of Jairus. This narrative is captured in all the 3 synoptic gospels of Luke, Mark, and Matthew. And it became the context for our theologizing and our naming of the issues that we needed to continue researching on. In small Bible study groups, led by women biblical scholars, among us, we reread, listened, and contextually unpacked this powerful narrative in community, highlighting women's agency, faith, power in dire economic, patriarchal, and hierarchical situations. This woman, who was so desperate, through a huge crowd, the only option she had was to touch the cloak of Jesus as he moved towards Jairus' home to go and heal his dying daughter. So in this context, we find that the woman was being prevented from even explaining herself to Jesus by the disciples who had accompanied Jesus. And that's why for us as African women, it is a very powerful story, because eventually the narrative was no longer that of an unnamed woman, an unnamed girl who lived many centuries ago. It became our story, our childhood, our womanhood, and that of the women and girls whom we had left behind, who sit in our churches, who sit in our Muslim communities, and we brought them into the conversation as we unpacked this Bible study. And we began to find our theological voice by encountering the woman, the 12-year-old girl, and the power of healing from Jesus himself. In that regard, in our journey, we have encountered supportive men who embrace our vision, but who do not shy away also from critiquing our scholarship. We usually refer to these men as our Josephs in our lives, in the spirit of Joseph, of Mary, the mother of Jesus. We remember how Joseph was called into a very difficult context to accompany a pregnant young woman whom he was supposed to be marrying and yet the pregnancy was not his, and he never abandoned Mary. So these men who listen to us, hear our cries, theologize with us, we have named them the Josephs in our lives. From this gathering, we found to arise, as the texts in the Bible had reminded us, and to lift our voices, and that of all silenced, muted, marginalized, humiliated, exploited, violated, taking cue from this unnamed woman and girl. We interrogate the women in the Bible who we also find that they are in the margins of their religious communities and in society. We learn from these women as we theologize, but also as we create sermons, those of us who preach. Like Njeri, we care deeply about the women in the margins of religious communities and society as we interrogate their own theological and ethical thoughts and practices. I remember when I started my parish ministry in Bahati, many of the women in my congregation were market women. And as a young woman, they indeed taught me a lot about their faith, about their struggles. And when I encountered these other African women, I could hear similar stories of how they work together with these women to develop theological thought and practices that address the injustices of this world. So from the outset, we agreed to journey together, mentoring one another as we struggled to grow our research, our editorial and writing capacity, especially because many of us were from theological institutions, which at the time were focused on ministerial training and ordination, and mostly ordination by then was open only to men in most of our churches. So with limited academic research and writing emphasis, we had indeed to struggle to find our capacity. And that's why for us, working together up to this day has been very important as we mentor one another, not only in writing, but also the researching methodologies, editorial work, and also negotiating for the publications of our findings. This also included fundraising to facilitate publishing, scholarships, so that many women would become part of this community of theologically educated women, not necessarily seeking ordination, but seeking the education itself, which is very empowering. Like Njeri, we invoke childhood learnings from our grandmothers, mothers, sisters, how to grow powerful sisterhood in faith and to overcome obstacles in solidarity with one another. We approach our research and writings from different theological fields of biblical and cultural hermeneutics, systematic theology, ethics, religious studies, church history, and from lived experiences. We agreed on a variety of topics to explore for 7 years, meanwhile enlarging the circle through country chapters, taking into account the academic language of each country. So some of us write in English, others French, and Portuguese. We also rediscovered the art of storytelling as a powerful methodology of reclaiming our own dignity, our humanity, what we are also calling Ubuntu. It has also helped us through storytelling to recapture the indigenous African spirituality and cultural heritage, which are transformative and healing and life-giving. In addition, from field and archival research and theological and historical literature reviews, as well as engaging with the journal of memoirs, biographies, and autobiographies, we are continuing to unearth and recovering and naming women and their enormous contributions in establishing churches and shaping Christianity, theology, and ethics in Africa. You find that most of the writings before we came on board, you rarely discover who are the women, many women who have founded churches in this continent and who continue to found those churches. We also, for instance, in my PhD thesis at Princeton Theological Seminary, I interrogated and interviewed the Gikuyu women who shaped the founding of the Presbyterian Church of East Africa. Mostly we hear the stories of the missionaries and the men who became the church leaders. But in 1922, there was a group of young women who were introduced to what the Scottish Presbyterians call Women's Guild or Girls' Guild. And they started also interrogating these women in the Bible, learning about the harmful cultural practices of the day. And one of them is what we call the female circumcision in those days. And it is these young women in 1922 who joined the missionaries to say no to female circumcision for their daughters. And they formed what they then called Kiamakeago, the Council of the Shield. They invoked a symbol of defense because they said they would have to defend their daughters from being circumcised. This story, I lived with this from my own mother, who was born at Tomotomo. And even though her mother never became a Christian, but had gone to Mabere school, decided when her daughters are ready, they will not be circumcised. So my mother would retell that story all the time to me. And so when I went to do my doctoral thesis, I decided to discover who are these women by name. And that's the thesis that I did, and later published a book, Kiamakeago, Ethics of Resistance and Transformation, which emerged from these women in the 20s all the way to the 1970s. Consequently, we affirm our dignity and humanity as embodied in Ubuntu philosophy and ethics. It is through such ongoing exercises that has provoked some of us to engage in the task of decolonizing and engendering theological education curricula and discourse as a whole. A good example of one of the institutions in this country where this has been happening since the 1990s is St. Paul's University, Limuru, which was formerly Theological College and a leading theological institution in Kenya since 1903. Indeed, next year, St. Paul's will be celebrating 125 years since it was founded in the coast. In addition to mentoring new generation of circle members We make efforts to ensure our publications are required readings in theological institutions, which remains a daunting task. In the 1990s and 2000s, at the height of the HIV and AIDS epidemic, when many churches and theological institutions were preaching judgmental sermons, practicing stigma, rejection and marginalization of children and people living with HIV, the circle was credited for making major contributions in creating sermons and a body of biblical theological reflections to mitigate against these death-dealing theologies and ethics. By using contextual Bible studies methodology on rape, gender-based violence, and exclusion narratives in the scriptures and in our lives, we join other liberation theologians to break the silence against rape in churches and in our religious institutions, which largely remain a taboo topic, especially among the clergy, theological educators, and in many of our religious communities. Recently, in this decade, we have addressed the deadly impact of pandemics. We continue to address HIV, but also COVID, sexual gender-based violence, and the escalating ecological crisis as they affect Mother Africa and Mother Earth. So we made a commitment to add on addressing the ecological crisis, and there has been quite a number of publications on ecofeminism from our own perspectives and experiences. It is in this context that I wrote Commendable Feminist Champions of Ubuntu by Excellence, a book that brings Mercy Aba Oduyoye, Wangari Muta Maathai, and Dennis Mukwege into conversation. Both Wangari and Dennis Mukwege are Nobel Prize winners. We remember Wangari won the prize 2004, and Dennis Mukwege, a renowned gynecological surgeon in Eastern DRC, got the prize 2018. Dennis Mukwege focuses on treating rape injuries of women in Democratic Republic of Congo. So I bring these three well-known, a theologian, an environmentalist, and a gynecologist who claim to be feminists in their own right, but who in their life, in their writings, in their practices in the communities, embrace the spirit of Ubuntu. And so that's how I celebrated the 35 years of the founding of the Circle of Concerned African Women Theologians. We returned to Ghana in July 2024 as a large group of theologians, African women theologians, not only to celebrate 35 years of the Circle publications, which are many, and above all, to celebrate the 90th birthday of Mercy Aba Oduyoye, who graced the occasion with a lot of energy. She could even stay late at night dancing with us as we celebrated our achievements and as we envisioned the life ahead. So most of our publications, even though a few of us have published individual books, most of our publications are anthologies, where we have collected, researched essays, and edited by ourselves and of course, with the content, editing the content, and having the publishers do the rest of the work. Among the publications, the most recent is in 2025, published by UNISA Press, is celebrating the founding members of the circle, which is called Mothering African Women's Theologies, Pioneers of the Circle of Concerned African Women Theologians. May her story continue to live on. And thank you, my sister Njeri, for this opportunity.
She came to carry out research at Kamkunji Nyayo Working Sheds on how informal activities affect the economy of our country. A year later, we met again at Monetary Studies at Roraka on the subject informal sector tax inclusion. During lunchtime, we had a small discussion, and she suggested that I join her class at the University of Nairobi, which I took positively. We've been engaging with her since then until she migrated to the US. But I'm happy all that we were doing was touching the life of people. The lady who is now seated next to us or among us is a very important lady. Most of our documentations has touched our life. Especially I've read 2 books, The Vyama as Institution of Hope, and From the Margin to the Center. I think those who are at the margin nowadays, they are not recognized in the society. The people look at us, we people from the informal sector, as a nobody. We don't touch them, even though we are doing some kind of work that help us to feed our families. And we also help the government, because what we are doing make people to be engaged so that they can decide not to engage in other activities that are evil. But the government nowadays are trying, they are just trying through the interventions of the intellectuals like Njeri Kinyanjui. Allow me to tell you something here a little bit. One day, my sister, Njeri Kinyanjui, told us in our class, this is what the lady told us. And this thing really touched my life. During the lecture time, she told us that there is nobody who is considered as a poor man on earth or in the world. What leads to the state of being poor is the situation where one is not in a position to properly engage mindfully. According to Mary, she believed that only mentally disabled individual is the one who should be called a poor man in the society. Physically stable person has 3 values. According to Mary, this person has the body, strength, and mind. And when the mind is used properly, the mind can tell somebody, go to such a place and do something that can help you. You are going to use the strength, and you stand where your body is supposed to be, then your mind do something. That's what the lady used to tell us. And in fact, one day, when we were discussing how we can sustain ourselves in our class after school, she told us that people should deviate from salary syndrome, because the salary syndrome is what is making Kenya to be poor as it is today, because people are going to class with a mentality that after schooling, they can be employed. And that job is not there. I think the urban arrangements or the employment that people look for, that make people to go to school, are nowadays on the decline, and they are not there. Through that kind of teaching, I found that my sister told us, one day she told me, do not fear, because you are also a person. You can also be heard in the space or in the society. He told me one thing. I want to read it to you. History is not a piece of paper that can be picked from the ground, but it is something which is made or created. Do not wait for for the provision, for nobody is willing to offer you even a space. Those who made history were maimed or killed. Some migrated to other nations, but the fact remained that they were heard in one way or the other. Please try your best to be heard at your level. At your level. And that led me to remember what I read in some documentations where I captured the following. Somebody called Kaloa the Green wrote something in April this year about Kenyans should stop waiting for heroes since they live among them. I stood beside two graves that remind me how quickly life can change and how long a meaningful life can continue to speak. My dear friend Stephen Ngai Musyoka and his wife Genafina Mwambui Ngei, directors of Makindu Motors, were laid to rest before nearly 20,000 mourners after they died in a tragic road accident. They had gathered not because Ngei had held a bigger office, but because he had quietly earned a meaningful place in their lives. As I reflected on the welfare, one truth came unmistakable. We were not burying the motorcycle he had assembled. They were not burying the livelihoods he had created. They were still feeding their families. That was an historian. According to this brought me to remember what my sister taught me in class. She told us that we will not be given a space in the society, but we need to do something. Another thing Kaluo the Green did in April this year, he said this: leaders should build the history that Kenya will be proud to read in future. Many Kenyans think history is what dead stones remember. Greece recently taught me that history is what living leaders write every day. So we need to be doing something that the future people one day will remember. And without doing this, it means that we are killing our own society. I want to move very fast because the time is not on my side. I also read a certain documentation. The same April, I heard the current governor of Kisumu, Nyong'o, saying this: I'm not writing this document as one who has all the answers. Which means Nyong'o was giving people space so that they can also echo their minds and their feelings towards the issues which are attaching their life. As we are here today, I don't know what we can learn from this kind of documentations. Let me finish by reading you a certain piece of document. It is something written in the book of Luke, chapter 5. I'm not here to preach. And it came to pass that as the people pressed him upon him to hear the word of God, he stood by the lake of Gennesaret and saw two ships standing by the lake, but the fishermen went out of them and were washing their nets. And he entered in one of the ships, which was Simon's, and prayed him that he could thrust out a little from the land, and he sat down and taught the people out of the ship. Now when he had left speaking, he said unto Simon, launch out into the deep, underline the word deep, and let down your nest for a draught. And Simeon answering, saying unto him, Master, we had toiled all the night and have taken nothing. Nevertheless, at thy word, I will let down the net. And when they had this done, they enclosed a great multitude of fishes, and their net brake. And they beacon into their partners, which were in the other ship, that they should come and help them. And they came and filled both the ships so that they began to sink. My question is, what did Jesus do? The answer is, Jesus did the planning which the fishermen do not have or did not have. For you to plan, you must consider two things.
Fred, I'll give you 2 more minutes.
Thank you. You consider two things. Objective condition of the lake, the objective condition of our working environment, how we trade and how we migrate and how we brush shoulder with the county government of Nairobi. The kind of machineries the fishermen were using, tools and equipment, safety gears, and many other things. 2, subjective will of the fishermen. To get money to marry a wife or wives, buy a car, buy a plot, build plots for commercial purposes, open another business. I think what we are lacking at Kamkunji or any other area where informal business are being done, it is the planning which we are lacking. We are not having the proper planning. In planning, we must create or apply 6P principle. Proper prior planning prevents poor performance. We need a planner. Can we have another Njeri Kinyanjui who can plan for the informal sector? Who can come to our rescue? Who can document, think that the city government are going to read? Who can confront the officers? Let me live by reading this to you, my dear brother, if you allow me. I read this from some documentary from Mabati Rolling Mills. They are saying this: every building situation speaks hope for the future generations. Please leave your mark. With every building solution, we continue to leave our mark on Kenya. Every roof shelters joy and warmth. Build boldly and leave your mark for the future. Every roof shelters a story. Let yours be one of innovation and lasting impact. Leave your mark. Every building houses ambition and innovation. Let yours leave a mark that lasts. Each color is a reflection of your spirit. Leave a mark where your heart finds peace. Every great journey starts with a vision, a dream of a brighter future, where every home, school, hospitals, and gathering places reflects our hopes. The spaces we create leave a lasting mark, not just on the world around us, but on the people within them. For 40 years down the line, the Kamkunji Juakali Nyayo working sheds help bring these visions to life with durable and the beautiful building solutions. As we move into this kind of dispensation, I want to tell you today that with the minds and the likes of the sister Njeri Kinyanjui, if we can have many Marys among us, then we can move this country to another level. Let me tell the gathering that I'm lacking the right descriptive adjectival clause to describe what my sister stood for.
Great, Fred.
I'm happy that I'm addressing the scholars, the lecturers, the intellectuals, those who have been bigger officers like Mary. And I want to tell you today, if you cannot stand tall and get us the right policies, then informal sector can go nowhere.
As a global theologian and an ecumenical leader who is now 92, I was speaking about her. She's one of my role models as a theologian and an ecumenical leader. I wanted to engage her with Wangari Muta Madai because we were addressing ecological crisis, to see how we learn from people like Wangari through their writings and their activities and their beliefs and values. But I thought because Mercy is the one who taught us that a bird does not fly with one wing, I felt it was necessary to bring a man alongside that conversation who happened to be a gynecologist, a Christian, and an African who is also a global icon. So I had these three into conversation, and we were celebrating 35 years of the Circle of Concerned African Women Theologians. So through what they have gifted us, and the two, of course, are still living, except Wagari, who passed on several years ago. They teach us a lot about Ubuntu. But I also wanted to remind my sisters who are not very comfortable to identify themselves as feminists, that there are women and men who acknowledge they are feminists. So in my book, I highlight Mercy's story and how she talks about her feminism, Wangari Maathai and her feminism, and Dennis Mukwege himself as a man, as a feminist. He has written a very powerful book on power of women, whom he treats after they have been gang raped and with very difficult injuries. So he does plastic surgery and other things like that. So
part of the people who have been working hard to see that coffee time at least is translated in Njeri's language, which is Kikuyu. And we want to celebrate Daktari. We are only a bridge to what she has written. Of course, we wish that we shall also become authors soon, because she has been mentoring us. So, our experience with coffee time, and I hope I'm talking to people who have read it, is not different from other books that Dr. Njeri has written. They are a testament that Njeri wants to challenge status quo always. She wants to challenge bureaucracy. She wants to bring out people, relationships, resilience, and that truly we can beat the odds. And of course, there is the fact that she's able to really look at very complex issues and break them down into very simple ideas. And she's also able to pick, topics. Who would have known that Kahowa Namashani can become a book, a whole book, and a topic in development studies. It's amazing, and keep up the good work. So quickly, we see natural Njeri in her early childhood, growing up in Igamba, in Gatondo North, and she is always able to bring out the valleys, the mountains, the rivers, and you can see people crossing over to go and pick coffee. She's also able to bring out the characters in her story, the relationships as talked about. She's able to bring out her auntie. She's able to bring her uncles along. She's able to describe her village. You can always see the setup, Kamufutate, that's full of houses, and she says there was only one area for bathrooms. So you can imagine everybody trotting out there. It has a lot of joyful moments, but also melancholic ones, and a lot of humor. And some of the scenes I would pick out were the Nyafara and how mean he was, and how the village was turned into a coffee and tea plantation and the way the father would make the farm so beautiful that other people would come and get educated in the farm, just showing how education is so central to Daktari. So thank you for bringing out that. The book is written in very respectful language, and even when she says the way she witnesses in Cambridge, coffee time, and versus what is happening in the village, it leaves you out at how a young girl can write her story picking coffee, but when she's in the topmost scholarship fields, she's still thinking, how did I pick coffee? How is my village relating to coffee and tea? And how is the international scene, relating with this coffee and tea? And as I had asked a question with from the informal sector, I think us who are able to read these things and escalate them, it's time that we have, conversations along. The book is also very rich in idioms, so you will want to read the Kikuyu one. One oriadomo kagira goare, how they carried the tea. There are lots of metaphors and proverbs. So we look forward. Njeri has been my mentor. I started work some time back, and she mentored me into the work world. We've worked a lot in the area of unemployment, and I ended up doing my PhD in that area.
Carol has already introduced the book, that is Coffee Time, and I hope that you can hear me well. So for me, I'll not go to talk about much about the setup of the book. But one thing for sure, this is a very, very readable book. Coffee Time, published by Lagar Publishers, only 30 pages long. And I encourage all of you to read this book. There is something that has surprised me about Dr. Kinyanjui. She's actually a poet. If you have read the other book, Ubuntu, which is more of poetry, and even this Coffee Time, it is not a book that is written for serious intellectuals. Very, very easy, and everybody should be able to read. So for me, I'll talk about what I find in this book. Njeri, in a very, very easy way, talks about very, very serious things. One, she talks about something called political economy. And what is political economy? Political economy is the interaction between political power and economic power. And she is able to talk about it in a very, very easy way by describing one of the women in the village, one of her aunties. Then she also talks about development theory. Development theory. Again, in a very, very easy way. And then she also talks about gender. So let me unpack all these things for you. One, Njeri talks about those people at the margins, like the Juakalis, those who are farming coffee, tea. And this is where her auntie comes in. And she is able to unpack this story in a very, very easy way. That right from the times of colonialism, what happened? These people took our land. But who was working on that land? It is our ancestors, our grandfathers, our grandmothers. How did they live? Living in very, very difficult conditions, getting exploited, working many hours, being beaten by that nyapara that Dr. Caro has talked about. And then, even after we got independence, we are still having the same problem. And therefore, she talks about coffee time. Coffee time. Kahawa. And this coffee time is very interesting because this coffee time means different things for different people. So what is coffee time for that woman in the village? Anaamka mapema, wakes up very, very early in the morning to go and pick coffee. Even the children, and that is where Njeri comes in, she would also go there and pick the coffee, even without taking breakfast, works very hard. And then what do they get out of that coffee? Very little. Very little out of that coffee. And this is the story even today, that most of those who grow coffee, who grow tea, at the end of the day, they are told that so much money has been deducted because of taxes, because of loans, because of other things, and therefore they get very little. So where is the problem? The problem is that there are several layers of exploitation. Here, locally, even at the cooperatives, we have some corrupt individuals. They start stealing money from there. Then at the government level, okay, they are also taking some money from the same coffee. So what gets to the farmer is very, very little. Now, at the global level, international level, there is also coffee time. Coffee time, for those people, it is time to make money. They make a lot of money. Those global companies, like Starbucks, Huko America, there are others called Darkins. There are even coffee companies, even in places like China, where they don't grow coffee, but they are making money out of our coffee and exploiting the farmer at the end of the day. So where is the farmer today? Today, when you look at the farmer in the village, whether it is the one who is growing coffee or tea, what do you find there? Money has been deducted because of pesticides, fertilizers, etc. So the children are dropping out of school. Some of our young people are becoming drunkards. There are broken families because of this exploitation. And this exploitation is in all those places. This is what Njeri talks about. It's a very, very sad story. And then Njeri also talks about gender. And that is where her auntie comes in. This auntie of Njeri, for your information, was not married. Was a staunch Catholic, going to Jumuiya every week, going to church early in the morning, even to clean up the church. But what does she get out of this? First of all, you know, coffee and tea does not belong to the women, traditionally. It is the men who control. Even hiyo kidogo, the little money that comes out of there, it is money that goes to men. They are the ones who go to the bank to cash that money. So where is the girl child? Where is the woman in trouble? Now, even this one in church, she's doing all this, but because she is not married, even the church did not even bury her when she died. That is a sad story. Because we have got that problem in the society that, and we see it every day, that discriminates against the unmarried girl. They do not want to know why is she not married, but things are the way they are. And Njeri talks about all that in a nice way in coffee time. So please, read Coffee Time. Coffee time means different things. Those living very well, they're enjoying their coffee in big hotels, Norfolk, wherever in London, New York, here in Nairobi, okay? Coffee time. Those in the village, their coffee time. Sweat, hunger, pain.
I stand here to celebrate my teacher. I call her Prof. Njeri Kinyanjui. She taught me way back around 2002 at the Institute for Development Studies, University of Nairobi. So this is a book we were to review and discuss. Quite an interesting piece. But as I discuss or raise my points, around one or two on this book, Njeri, next time when we have a reprint of this book, we need a bit of decoloniality in the cover. Why am I saying that? This cover presents one side of the story. Because reading your book, like Dr. Felix has identified, I see something of a paradox. Here is a situation where Njeri's grandfather has been granted an opportunity to plant coffee. So Njeri's father, Njeri's family, community sees a lot of hope in coffee. Hope in terms of better income, better living standards. But then, years after producing coffee, what is it that they get in return? They are not my ones. What they see in return is disappointment. Now, compare that, and I think my colleague has spoken about it, to the consumer of coffee in Europe. What does coffee time look like? It's leisure. It's time to think. For Njeri, for grandfather, for aunt, and for uncle, it's time to put extra work. These two contradictions, I think, is a key message we get from this book. Does the situation hold up to now? I think Felix spoke about the political economy. I come from a coffee growing zone, and I completely relate very well with Njeri's story. The story remains. To the consumer, to the producer of coffee somewhere in Muranga, somewhere in, I don't know, in Meru, their coffee time is one of putting more and more labor with minimal returns, but other actors along the coffee value chain, they receive the highest value. But remember, who owns the coffee? It is the farmer. Who owns the greatest value? It is other actors in the value chain. And in the book, Njeri tries to associate some of the challenges that explain this situation. For example, what is the relationship in the global coffee value chain? But now, as I think I also pose a question. Yes, on one hand, there is the challenge of the global coffee value chain. But what are our own local institutions doing to better the experience of our coffee time? My answer, they are not doing as much. There are structural challenges that they are not addressing. Point number two I want to emphasize, which I think comes from this book, is the question of gender inequalities and the question of social justice. Yeah, I felt touched the way Njeri's aunt was buried. A Catholic, devoted Catholic, but then, unfortunately, there was no priest to bury the aunt. That's a story. It's a social justice issue. Of course, there are matters of faith there. But more importantly, Njeri documents who is providing labor in the coffee farms. Mostly it's women, mostly girls. But then, when money comes, who goes for the money? Who makes decision? It's men. Largely a men's crop. So there is a question, and I ask the question, has this situation changed fundamentally? To me, the answer is no. When we look at our agricultural, the rural setup, still, women and girls provide the bulk of the labor. How much value do they get in return? I think each of us can judge that. So there is a question of dignity, social justice around there. And then my final point I want to speak about, when I look at this particular book, you may think it's not written by an academic. Yet, Njeri combines academic rigor, but very simple language, harvesting knowledge that we take for granted. And to me, it does represent what I would call a piece in decolonizing methodologies, decolonizing knowledge. That when we look at coffee time, we can say knowledge is out there for scholars to go and harvest. The question is, how many of us have these skills to go and document this story. And it's important because it's telling the story of our people, using their poetry, using their language, and making it count at the global level. Then, when I look at coffee time again, are we helpless? To me, the answer is no. And I'll quote the last one particular section of this book where Njeri says, next time you enjoy a cup of coffee, stop and think about how more than 100 million people involved in the coffee growing industry have worked together to help you open your day. So as I conclude, from a producer point of view, a consumer point of view, an intermediary point of view, Njeri is inviting us to search for a win-win situation, so that for the producer, they enjoy their coffee time. For the intermediary, they also have an opportunity to enjoy their coffee time. And for the consumer, so that they also enjoy their coffee time. And that's why I'm saying I would love to see in the next copy, where we have the challenges of a coffee producer with their labor. Now here we only have the consumer. So that we have a win-win situation. Njeri, we celebrate you and thank you.
I was very privileged to be supervised by her, and I've continued my work in the field that I did my research thesis at the IDS in 2013 to date, which is on the care economy. I'd like to begin by saying that it's really a great honor to celebrate the legacy of Dr. Kinyanjui. As has been said by many who've gone before me, she's able to articulate issues on the margins or affecting people from a very simple and also from a very complicated perspective. For me, I'd say her work on Utu feminism reminds us that scholarship should promote dignity, justice, and our shared humanity. She has inspired so many through her academic excellence and thoughtful writings, and the belief that knowledge should not only contribute to the wealth of knowledge, but to a caring and equitable society. So we truly celebrate you for that. This work is really based off my master's thesis, which I was privileged to be supervised by Dr. Kinyanjui. So why care? One is because women dominate informal childcare work, and care has a lot of implications as to how women are able to engage in the economic space. There are so many vulnerabilities and contextual realities that women face when doing care work. One, this sector remains largely informal with limited data. Childcare work is not sufficiently recognized or valued. And then there's lack of coordination within that sector. There are patriarchal and retrogressive social norms within that sector. And women who are in these situations, who work in urban informal settlements, need a place where they can leave their children. So based off the Utu feminism principles, the lens through which we see the care economy, or through which I have seen the care economy over the last 15 years, has been through the design principles that Dr. Kinyanjui has really advocated for over her course of writing. One is the issue around self-reliance, where feminist goals of women is working in the informal economy are to be self-reliant. And so they have evolved structures and systems to support them to be able to take care of their children through informal childcare providers called daycare centers. And they pay, based on trust, they are able to take care of children. Then there's also solidarity within this sector that we've also been able to experience, where women in the informal sector do not have city or national policies that protect them. And therefore they have to come together either as chamas or as vikundi of women to really support each other and to survive and to build social relations that allow them to be able to socially engage, productively engage, and take care of their children. Then the third piece is reciprocity. So the feminism in this context shows humanness. So you'll find that, for example, in the work that I've done over the years and the work that we did during my master's thesis, one of the things we found was that there were women who had children living with disabilities or children who had very critical conditions. These women came together, pleaded with the church, they were given a hall, and they're able to take care of their children in turns. There are those who cooked, there are those who washed their children, there are those who went to learn what medical aid the children needed, and they really supported each other. And through the informal works, they were able to bring together different monies to support them. Then cooperative competition. One of the things that I've observed with the care economy of the child care centers is that the women do not really work based on competition. Who's gonna do better? But how do we come together, for example? Who will do the night care? Who will do the daycare? How can we come together, buy water together in the informal settlements? How do we come together and buy different things in bulk, etc.? So as much as there's so many vulnerabilities within the childcare sector and women trying to work, the Ubuntu feminism principles have allowed the women to really thrive and do well within that sector.
Social entrepreneurs are faced by two conflicting aspects. Number one, they have the commercial space within which they need to experience what we call the finance institutions, the institutional logic that says that here we are going to commercialize and we are going for profit generation. And yet, you're a social entrepreneur who wants to bring impact and change society. So we find that there is the structural conflict that is forcing the entrepreneur to actually bid to their normative pressure. And then on the other hand, we also have the entrepreneur who wants to advance, because my area of interest is on the startups who are existing below 3 years, so that we actually encourage them to actually grow beyond the 3 years. So when you're new, what happens? You have role models, you have models, you have people you're aspiring to. But we don't really have role models who are in the fintech industry and are social entrepreneurs. They're in the fintech for business. So there's a gap when it comes to role models there. So the entrepreneur opts to mimic the other fintechs, and that doesn't actually fit within their space. So how do they maneuver that? And it's actually through the introduction of bringing in the whole aspect of Utu and Ubuntu and say, can we look at it at a relational perspective and say, how do we nurture the relationships within the social entrepreneurs, build the beneficiaries within the enterprises, so that we can now say that we are going out for social transformation. Okay. Okay,
you can
3 more minutes, because some time was taken with the technical hitches.
Okay.
So for me, Ubuntu is all about looking at the processes and not just aiming at the key result. So are we just talking about social impact? Are we just talking about social transformation? Or can we also go back and see how are we promoting indigenous growth within the social enterprises? How are the different players actually being incorporated? So in my theoretical framework, I'm looking at going beyond the institutional or stakeholder theory to say, can we use Ubuntu theory that actually looks at power from a relational perspective? Because stakeholder engagement gives us a hierarchy of different players with the different powers. When we talk about beneficiaries, I am using that term now because I am hoping that through my research, the participants in my research will coin a different term for themselves. I don't want to name them, but the beneficiaries, can we actually engage them as co-creators, as researchers, or are we going to extract information from them? So I hope by the end of my study that we will have a different term to use other than beneficiaries. And then the outcome will be collective well-being. Can we move beyond talking about sustainability? When we talk about sustainability, which for me, unfortunately, has a lot of Eurocentric connotations, is it the structure? Is it the institutions that we want to sustain? Or is it the people? So I'm centering the people and saying that with Ubuntu theory, we're talking about the collective well-being of the players within the enterprises and of the community, well-being even of the institutions. So I close by saying that in my methodology, I will use the Kamukunji approach, which goes beyond participatory action research, to say that because participatory action research, in as much as we're bringing on board the participants in the study to actually engage and contribute with their contributions, there is almost a demand for space. There is almost an abrasive confrontational aspect where the participants are demanding to be contributors. But when we talk about a relational perspective, we are saying that all the players agree that we are all valuable. So I am bringing in the Kamukunji approach in the methodology to actually say that we can be co-creators of strategy, not just co-creators of outcomes, so that we can have the investor in the fintech, we can have the founder and the beneficiary co-creating strategies together.
Technobyte is a firm that deals on several things. We deal on ICT consultancy and engineering consultancy. Again, we are a publishing firm and a research firm as well. So, as well, we deal with the urban planning. Daktari is a friend to Dr. Mary. So we are happy to be here in her function to honor her.
I'm the relationship manager to Daktari. We have worked with her throughout this journey, ever since she was a student up to now. So feel welcome to visit us. I'm based at Ruaraka branch. Tomorrow I'll be here with my branch manager, so we'll talk more about it. Please visit that desk. We have some brochures you can just come and pick, and I'm hoping that we are going to engage more. Thank you.
Right now I'm working with Nuria, and we are a bookstore that is up to promote African authors, African literature, and we are honored to also have stocked a couple of books by Dr. Njeri Kinyanjui, and you can also explore them over there at the back on our desk or on our website, www.nuriakenya.com. Karibuni Nuria, karibuni nyumbani.
I'm really grateful for you guys coming here and supporting my auntie. She has been a very important person to my life who supported me when I came out of campus and allowed me to stay at her place when I was pursuing my career as a bodybuilder. I'm a professional bodybuilder and also a personal trainer. And at the same time, yes, for me also, I did economics and sociology, but I decided to go to the business world. So I do personal training, online coaching. I go to compete outside, and at the same time, right now, I'm in the business of fashion. I have my own clothing brand. So I decided, what can I do a bit to appreciate my aunt. She was in the US. She told me I can help out with the water. And yeah, and this is just the start. I'm sure as we continue growing, we'll be able to do more. And guys, I'm really grateful for you guys coming and showing support and being here. Asanteni.
My academic journey has been full of many challenges. As a student mother and through health struggles, financial hardship, discrimination, and exclusion. At times, I felt like the Samaritan woman who went to the well at the midday to avoid the gaze of others. I endured these challenges not because I was strong, but because of the support and generosity of many people, including strangers who did not judge me. They accepted me as I was, offered a shoulder to cry on, held my hand, provided financial help, or simply smiled. My family, parents, the late Lemod, whom we just buried on the 4th, Edma Darena, my sisters and brothers, in-laws, grandparents, uncles and aunts, I remember vividly my Aunt Gatherero telling me, Njeri thoma nyumba itu yumebea, that is, go to school so that our house will not have rats. My cousin Kamau, who told me, Modo darumago akeruma, if you are cursed, don't curse yourself. My uncle Mudhamaki, who calls me Njeri Wito for solidarity. My cousins and nephews, who have stood with me in solidarity and shown me the importance of passing on the baton to the next generation. My nuclear family, my daughter, for challenging me in many ways, particularly her poem, Structured Living, which had a lot of hidden messages that have made me question many things. My granddaughters, who have rejuvenated my life, asking me questions and laughing at my stories and asking me to lead them in prayer before they sleep. Doesn't matter whether they are making my hair or polishing my nails. I wish to acknowledge my daughters and my grandchildren fathers. There is the University of Cambridge team, 1989 to 1992, who stood in solidarity with me through thick and thin. They include Modupe, Franca, and Ofona, who went to be with their ancestors, Henrietta Kalida and Generos Robinson. Others included Mushemi Gakuru, William Maema, Tim Maema, Sameruto, and the rest of the African society. My support system at Kenyatta University and University of Nairobi, I'll mention a few, included Mwikali, Lusikasioka, Waburageshimo, Teresa, Ignatia, Mogoiri Sisters, and Ken Divas. My academic mentors, Syria Nyamwero, Agnes Musyoki, Professor Michael Dako, who went to be the ancestors, David Kibo, and Michael O'Connor, who gave me a book on who controls industry in Kenya after my defense. This book was an indicator that a lot has to be done with indigenizing the economy. And it pains me to see the way we are handing over our economy to foreigners. Outside my gate, there is what they call, I don't know, Chinese square being placed at the university. My teachers, Mwarimu Magdalene, Marofo, Gadaro, Fani, and my geography teacher, Mr. Derry and Bogua, Bonnie, and others who included Jane and Washira, who did not want to be mentioned. The media fraternity that has created a platform for my popular publishing of my work. They include Gerard Getao Gushu, Joka of The Nation, Jiro Kagodo of The Standard, Marete and Kainga, and Masharia Munene and Felix Kerodho. Friends, I wish to mention Deborah Kioi, Rahab, Garoya, another one who has gone to be with the ancestors, Hinga and Rosa Kereka. Then there are the American Friends of Kenya, who include Silva Wayne, Francine and Bill Adams, and Father David of the Black Flyers. Then there is Nairi of the 5 colleges, Beth Ginepro, who took me to the sites which showed me the history of industrialization in the valleys of Connecticut. She also took me to butterfly sites where butterflies have been preserved in the city of South Hadley. She took me to many places which included churches, branches, and so many other things. Then there is Carl Coban, Kalia, Rida Pickborn, and Preston Smith, who during the COVID time would do shopping for me. Then there is Shauna K., Hori Hanson, and Roletta Rose, who supported me very much. And of course, there are my colleagues at Domestic Violence Shelter who, for whatever they did or not for whatever they did. Editors and publishers include Angela, Juma, Matuda, Kainga, Frances Nyamchom, and of course the Daily Nation and Standard newspapers. Then I have community and age mates who include ladies like Mudhoni Getere, Margaret Wafita, Jacinta Mwenda, and the other. And I cannot forget Njeri Muthe and Muthe Kafado for whatever they did me in my struggle as a single parent. And my data sources, Ignatius Gashero, Shoshoaga Kumo, Philomena Bari, Gojiriwa Bari, Frederick Dawa, and all the fraternity from Kamukoji. So, there are stories that used in terms of community, there is, my IDS workers, Professor Patley Karira, Professor Kamau, and many others, and Kamau, who also sponsored this symposium. Among the community members are Karaja Wangeve, Wamaga, who went to be with their ancestors, and Ninawa Jenny, who used to tell me, Dhoma dokanaye kuhoya shube. Go to school so that you will not ask money for salt. Then there was Tata Firevi, Dhoma, like your father, who was always leading in school. My uncle, who always celebrated my achievement, na Mwaki wa Ihega. I also remember another person who went to be with the ancestors, the late Father Mokoi, for his message. Reu megoda twahuririe kahua na dogetua ohe mwana alie uhone. That is, our land, we have filled it with coffee, but we cannot give it to children and get satisfied. Another person who went to be with the ancestors, the late Father Gashunga, about the need to be modest while addressing issues and the need to de-escalate rather than flare issues. This message of Father Gashunga resonates with us today because of the way we we are not being modest while handling issues, and the way we are escalating issues and failing them. And then Dr. Reverend Washege, the need for radical acceptance and identity. I could have moaned and groaned about my problems, but I chose one thing, not to moan and groan. I also chose the path that is less traveled by, I would say, the path less traveled. I can continue narrating my problems at Medaya Kagoni, Lingoge, without security or safety nets, but I chose a path supported by my sisters, brothers, nieces, and nephews, sometimes who never understood. I also remember, like Wairegi, when we were in the board, they didn't understand why I was telling them on the need for education. Now they have seen dams. I told them to think of buying land at Goigwa, Mangu investment, because Nairobi, Thika was expanding. But share to me that you brief women the next day. What I would like you to take away from my work, African women are not victims. They should not be viewed from a deficit model. The economy needs to be of circulation, not manipulative or extractive or exploitation. Community interests need to be balanced with individual interest in the spirit of Ubuntu. Healing is a slow process that needs to be based on the principles of nature, learning lessons from chameleons and the tortoise. I said there is so much anthropane caused by economy, anthropane caused by war, anthropane caused by what people call goons or whatever they call them. There is so much pain, but we can only heal using the principles of nature or learn lessons from chameleon and the tortoise. Understanding, and we should understand the concept of anthropane and replace it with the concept of poverty in socioeconomic analysis. Because what is the local definition of pain in your local language? We talked of pain that's caused by human being, and also understanding that we human beings are not disposable or subjected to minimization or maximization or being laid off because we need to reduce costs of the corporates. Understanding that the environment is our common home, like Pope Francis insists. Understanding that a seed does not land where it is thrown. You can throw a seed, but it can be blown by the wind and taken anywhere in the world, and it will start, grow, and flourish. Whoever is in control, whether it grows, sprouts, is not in our hands. That every human being has the spirit to thrive, grow, like the tiny animal that thrives on dry woods, represented by the logo of the flower thriving on concrete on my book. The fireside is an important site of knowledge. There were stories that I read, who will bail the cat? And this was a story based on rats, where the rats were debating, how do we bail the cat so that when he comes to the sitting room, we shall hear him and run away. So who among you is willing to take the daring step and bail the cat? Then there is the story of Kagogo Nahiti, told by Aunt Paulina. This story really makes my granddaughters laugh, because after a feast, the hyena decided not to go to the toilet because whatever he had eaten was too sweet. So what happens? He constipated, and the kagogo, or the crow, is the one that saved him. Then after that, the hyena did not take care of the crow. So the crow flew away, and one time when they met, the hyena asked the crow, "You are looking so beautiful, where did you go?" And the whatever it's called, the crow told him, "I went to the heavenly bliss." Then the hyena insisted on being taken to the heavenly bliss, and then all the hyenas, they assembled and they were taken to the heavenly bliss, and then the crow released its wings, and that was it. You can imagine why the hyena reaps. Then there is the childhood beetle game, whereby we would tie the beetle with a string, then we would sing the song, Muge wakwa wedhoa dhoe. And then when there was a sunshine, the beetle would fly, but would never leave us. So in this case, we tie ourselves in so many situations, like the beetle, without knowing who is tying us. Then for acculturation, we used to sing the songs like Mushere ne mwega ni ureagwo na gĩciko rĩrĩa ngũtua kũrĩa nengereria gĩciko. That rice is good, it is eaten with a spoon. When I want to eat, bring a spoon. So those who are talking about decolonization, they must start understanding how it happened. My principles, I won't tell you, but my turning points were my mother's teaching at the fireside of accountability. In the evening, my mother would always ask us, Mwatida mugekatia. That teaching of accountability is the basis of feminine economy. My father's critique to my first gender paper were influenced by Western paradigm of theory. He read it on the Standard or Nation that fathers don't take girls to school, and he was very mad with me. Then whenever I would call my father, he would always answer, "De kahoaini, I'm at the coffee time. I'm at the coffee farm." This made me to reject donor aid that financed research. Speech at my stepbrother's funeral, that my waboi nemuheani kiade, that is, she gave human beings a shoulder to cry. Then the piercing look, silent demeanor, and deep questions of my grandmother, Josephine Nyambura. She taught me importance of self-examined life. The analytical spirit and resistance of my maternal grandmother, whom people nicknamed her as Demenge, one who cuts, with her song, Biashokire, When Money Alive. My daughter's poem, Structured Living, which I have reported in the book Women and the Urban Economy, and my siblings' patience, generosity, and grace as well as radical love. I've also been inspired by the living archive on the Matatu canvas, sayings and nature. Lived experiences are sources of data. For example, in one Matatu I saw, it was written, Vumilia kama bibi ya mlevi. That is, be patient and persevere like the wife of a drunkard. And another one, if everyone is doing it, why not join them? Or the song, Maisha no Maya. So, all these are my canvas. That's what I try to interpret, and I have learned about institutions of hope, radical courage and determination, radical love and solidarity, working hard, an about spirit, and there is need to learn from the kitchen. That is, we should kitchenize our boardrooms. Equality between men and women or between races should not be mean like the submersion, like the situation where the river water enters the Indian Ocean and becoming part of the broken system. Those of us who have observed whether race or gender equality, they should see how we lose in the broken system, like the masculine system, when we want to work by their rules. Equality means, as a geographer, from the point of view of the Agujas Bay in South Africa, where the Indian Ocean meets the Atlantic, which means we stand bega kwa bega. That is, instead of competing, why don't we bring our warm current, like the Indian Ocean, stand next to each other, like at Agujas Bay in South Africa. And also, the research never stops. And one of the questions that I'm asking myself, are we building cities of the soul or cities of stone? And finally, after meeting Shosho Wagakumo last time, the topic I'm going to write about is the salt on the land. What happens when the salt arrived on the land? So thank you very much for listening to me. I don't want you asking Josie Saliva question, what are the key things that you have learned? I don't know what is the context of Ubuntu. Why don't you go and read books? Be active listeners. Listen to everybody. Listen to a sentence in the book before you draw your conclusion.